Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives.
Welcome back to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle, and we are so happy to bring you a new episode today with our special guest. And of course, I've got Papa Bear here with me. Miss Erin Kamm is with us.
Hello.
We're so happy to have you, and we're going to have you start out by telling us what is your check-in word for the day.
Ooh, gratitude.
Oh, I love that one.
Gratitude, yes.
Well, tell our audience a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a long time coming, so I'm excited to be on. My name is Erin Kamm. I'm a FitBody Fusion coach and team assistant manager. I started back in my fitness journey around 2014. I lived in North Carolina at the time. I was, joined the gym, kind of the typical like cardio bunny. I wanted to tone, get fit. My gym membership came with a few personal training sessions, and I was terrible, and I hated being bad at it. But I also fell in love with like how I was, able to challenge myself and see my body change. And over time, I got stronger, and people started asking me if I was competing, and I told them, no way in hell would I ever compete.
Oh, how the tides turn.
Yeah.
So glad you're living your truth.
Yeah, exactly. And I said that for a year. And then finally, after a year, again, I was putting on muscle. I was learning how to like take care of myself, feel my body. And finally, I was like, you know what? Why not? If I try it and hate it, I never have to do it again, but at least I did it. And that was 2016. And here we are in 2024. And I just completed my first pro rookie season. So
exciting.
Yes.
I know. I remember meeting you for the first time and just being like immediately falling in love with you. And, and I think we've been together ever since. So we're so happy to have you on the team. And I think, I want our audience to know a little bit about like your journey, both in terms of your competition journey as well as your health journey, because I know now you're making such a huge difference as a coach with your athletes and all the things that we go through in our own personal journeys. I think just kind of help inspire us to want to be more helpful. And I know that's definitely the case for you. So I'm excited to let everybody hear more about your journey. So
very much. So I'll start. So basically, long story, when I first started back in the gym, I was dealing with a severe eating disorder. So this is where, I joined the gym. I wanted to stay skinny, have abs. And this is how, like, as I learned to feel my body, like eat well, gain weight, see how the changes could come. Competing and learning the lifestyle is what really kind of pulled me out of those negative, mindsets and like, I stopped wanting to focus on the number on the scale and being as low as I can and putting on muscle and like really seeing like, okay, like I feel good, I'm strong. Like it wasn't about like how I looked like being skinny anymore. It was like, I'm strong, I feel good. Like it was empowering to kind of see what my body was capable of. So, that's not to say during the, since I competed in my first show in 2016, that's not to say I didn't still struggle with the eating disorder, but I made the promise to myself when I first decided to compete, if my health ever suffered as a result of competing, I would take a step back. And so I competed in 2016, 2017, went through some life changes. I moved to Florida, kind of fell back into the eating disorder habits. And when I say eating disorder habits, it started as anorexia back when I was 12. So I really wasn't eating, over-exercising. I mean, I would do hundreds of crunches in my room at night after I ate. And then through the years as it evolved into more like bulimia, binge purge, everything like that. And so during the time that I had stepped away, I lost a lot of muscle because I had fallen back into those negative habits. When I moved to Florida, I moved to be closer to family. I started with another coach back when I moved down there, kind of got myself together again, started like reverse dieting, putting the muscle back on, pulled myself out of it, and then got back on the stage. I think it was around like 2018, had a brutal prep. I mean, food was low, cardio was high, which for me has not been normal, but it was like, it was a very hard prep, and it was just not the right, it just was a really hard experience. And of course, post-show, that's the first time I had issues post-show, just because I was, navigating, the hunger cues, and I kind of fell back into the binge purge too. And then, so after my 2018 season, I was like, I knew I needed to take a different direction. So I kind of took a step back again in 2018, end of 2019. So when I found you, so I started, I think it was actually New Year's Eve 2019, with FitBody Fusion. We immediately, I was already reversing at the time. And so we continued to reverse me, come into 2020. The season, that was a hard season with COVID, but I started with you. We were about 3 weeks out from my first show in 2020 and everything shut down. So still prepped all through COVID. I was still living in Florida, so I moved in with my parents, prepped through that whole thing. And what I'm grateful for is once shows did open up in 2020, they were all in Florida because Florida was open. And that's where, obviously, FitBody Fusion sponsored a lot of the shows that were in Florida. So you guys came out to Florida frequently. So I got to be more involved. I got to come out to shows, volunteer at the booth. Finally, when shows opened, I was able to start competing. So Tampa Pro, I think, was the first show that started after COVID. So competed in that. And then even when my season was over, obviously all of the shows were still going on down there. So I got to be more involved. And then at the time, though, I was in corporate. So I was working in clinical research, traveling every week, Sunday to Friday, for clinical research studies. And of course, that meant we were on the COVID studies. And it was so much. They worked us to the bone. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, but it wasn't something I was passionate about. To me, it was a paycheck, but it was I had no life outside of work because I was traveling all the time. And I'll never forget, I think towards February of 2021, I remember sending you an email and I was like, hey, I know coaching, maybe you might not have any availability for coaching now, but I just wanted to let you know, down the line, this is something I'm interested in. And I remember you responding, you're like, oh, we were just having a conversation about bringing you on board, but we didn't think that was something you'd ever be interested in. And I was like, nope, sure is. And so then kind of, in the months kind of following that, I sold my condo in Florida, moved out to Arizona, quit my corporate job, and moved into coaching full time. I think my parents thought I was going through a quarter life crisis. But so that was 2021. And, I ended up, after my 2020 season, I took 2 years off, just because we knew I needed to build. I mean, I've got these long limbs. I knew I needed to build. I was able to kind of at that time, that's when I would really say, after kind of the 2019 season, that's when I would say I've been in recovery from my eating disorder, just because we were able to get my food up. I learned that I'm a person that needs a lot more food than most other people. And I think it was because I had never fueled my body to that extent that I was still having issues with food. So I took the 2 years off, put on some good muscle, really focused on coaching and the administrative side, and then came back in 2022. I remember we started prep in December and nothing happened. Nothing happened with my body. And so we ended up, I went to see a naturopath, got blood work done, was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. We put me on medication, and things started happening again. But as we moved through prep, my body started responding. We got me on stage 3 times before I was even supposed to compete for the first time. Season was going really well. And then it was the week before, so leading into peak week of junior nationals, I had to put my dog down. And I had him for 16 years, so over half my life at the time, and I was devastated. I knew the time was coming, just because, he was getting older, he was having issues, but it just was a very unexpected. I was actually getting ready to go on a trip to work a show, and I got the call from the dog sitter, he's not doing well, he's probably not gonna make it. And, that was, like I said, going literally 2 days before peak week was gonna start for junior nationals, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I was so devastated. he was my best friend. And so I just didn't know what to do, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw myself into competing. It was a really good distraction for me. I got to focus on, because obviously at this time, like we thought like we were really pushing hard for that pro card. So I ended up doing junior nationals. It took everything in me to step on stage that day. I knew it wasn't my best. Just mentally, I wasn't there. Like it was a fight to just get on that stage. I know I got top 5. I don't remember what I got in junior nationals, but I remember coming off of junior nationals, between junior nationals and universe, I just started to notice my body was off. I remember like I was staying with you guys at the time, and I was like, we started noticing my core just wasn't tight. And we would make adjustments, and it wasn't happening. Like nothing, like I just felt off. We also know my sleep was not good. I was sleeping about 2 to 3 hours every night, and that was it. So I started noticing things were off, and I was just, that's a lot of stress. I was going through some stuff at home, and there was just a lot going on that were just like, it's stress, grief, whatever. So then going into NPC Universe, I do remember like the night before that show, I was like, I don't think I can do this. I didn't feel my best. I didn't think I looked my best. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but you talked me off the ledge. And I think too, when I had a client competing at Universe, so it was like I was able to focus on that. And, I stepped on stage at NPC Universe. My client ended up going pro, and I ended up getting my pro card at Universe too.
Funny how that works sometimes, isn't it?
And it took a long time. I mean, from 2016 to 2022 to get there. And I mean, just because I knew I had to like really fight for it, and everything that I had to go through to get there, it was a very rewarding moment. Even though I just knew it wasn't my best. I just didn't feel it was my best. And I was still grieving, so I don't think I ever really got to enjoy that moment fully.
And I think you were also so excited about your athlete that turned pro that you forgot you even turned pro for a minute there.
Yeah. Well, I remember you came back after my client won her pro card, and had gotten off stage, and she was in the center, and you're like, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "Oh, I still have to compete." Like,
oh, we're not done yet.
It's my turn, which was good because it was pressure off of myself. So that was, it was just, such a rewarding day, and we kind of knew like we were going to call it after that, regardless of if I won my pro card, like we knew I needed a break. So after NPC Universe, I went into a reverse, and things just kind of started to go downhill after that, physically. Like my body just wasn't, I didn't feel good. I felt off. I knew something was off, but I couldn't really put my finger on what it was. I also wasn't hungry, which when you're post-show, you're not used to that. Usually I would be so hungry, and I was like, this is just not right.
Erin, but before we go into that,
yes,
okay, because I do want to get there, but I also, you just gave us a ton of stuff.
Yes.
And so I think, and I think maybe if we just we just kind of rewind just a little bit and break down some things,
yes,
because I think it will help everybody learn from and be inspired by your journey, which we have definitely been. So let's start with this maybe. How many shows was it before you got your pro card? How many nationals and how many regionals?
I want to say it was 16 total shows. Okay. So I think it was like 10 regional and like 6 national.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it was a lot of shows.
And as you're going through that process, and from going back in the gym and I'm never going to compete to then going and earning your pro card, how did you manage that mental aspect of that? Because there was a lot of times when you were close, and there was a lot of times when you weren't close. At least based on the placings, you may have been close, but placings, you can be close, but your placing is really all that matters. In that construct, it matters that you're progressing and you're evolving. But how did you keep mentally in the game and keep pushing, even with these struggles and the disappointments and things, other things that you had to deal with?
Yeah. And I think, for me, even it took 4 years just to win my class.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's like, and this is what I tell clients too, if you are in competing just to win, you are going to be disappointed every time. There can be one winner. So you're going to lose more often than not. For me, it was always proving to myself that I was getting better. Like I was always stepping on stage knowing I brought my best. I did everything I could. Like I followed the plan to a T. So I did all my cardio. I hit my lifts. Like I knew every time I stepped on that stage, I was bringing my best. And to me, it was like, as long as you keep doing that, your time will come. It's not a matter of like if, it's a matter of when.
And you don't get to pick your time.
No. And the only thing you can control is what you bring to the stage that day. And even some days you can't control that. I mean, whether you lose your pet or, lose a family member, you get your period. Like you can only control so much. You can't control what the judges are looking for that day.
Or who else shows up and how they look. And so, yeah.
And because this is a comparison sport, and I think this is always important, is that you can bring your best and you can have, because I always hear this with athletes, as they say, well, I didn't place as well at this show as I did the last show. And it's like, well, unless everybody is on stage looking exactly as they did before, and you look exactly like you did before.
And it's the same people.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
So
Yeah.
these are just not equal things. And the one thing I want you to get a little bit deeper on is, so on the day that you got your pro card, you did not feel that you brought your best, but you did bring, and that's a subjective thing. And you're obviously, the judges felt like whatever you brought was what they wanted. So, but how do you talk about that a little bit in terms of that feeling of not feeling like you're bringing your best, knowing that you did, but you also know that you did everything that you could do going up into that prep. So in that way, it was your best. It was just your, and I've shared with people that little diagram of it's from Adam Grant. It's like a peaks and valleys, which your best on any one day is going to look different. It may not be the same that you brought on your very best day, but if it's your 100% for that day, then it's your best. It just may be at a different level than what you brought the previous day or the previous week or whatever it is. So help us understand and talk us through that part of that mental kind of incongruity about you feeling like you didn't bring your best, but then getting the reward of the pro card.
I think for me, knowing what it took me to get on that stage that day, not only just losing Charlie, my dog, but from the 6 years that it took to get there, that's what I think made that moment so rewarding, is because I knew how much it took me just to step on that stage that day. Yeah. And I will say, and I say this to this day, I don't remember a single song that they've ever played when I've been on stage. I just black out. I don't remember any of it. But I remember when I was doing my routine, and I can't remember the artist, but the lyrics were like, everybody's going through something the minute my heels stepped on that stage. And it was like, that was the first moment of peace that I had gotten since Charlie died. So I think for me, it was like, I knew hey, even though this isn't my best, I'm here. And I did what I needed to do, regardless of if I wanted to do it or not. I did what I needed to do to get here. I think also too, like I said, when my client went pro, it was like that, I think too, made that moment even more special, is because not only did I do what I needed to do to get here, my client did that. We did this together. So that I think really helped make the moment special. But I do think, and we've talked about this too, is there was some disappointment that was the circumstances I got my pro card on, just because I didn't feel like I could fully enjoy it. But at the same time, I wouldn't change that now, because it was part of my journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've told you this before, so I'm not telling you something you haven't heard, but I would love for you to keep working on reframing that as to not that you did not bring your best, because it was your best
on that day. With all the circumstances.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like in sports, playing injured, a player who plays injured and they still, I think about Tiger Woods when he won I think it was the Masters, and he had a bum knee, but he still powered through and won. And people still talk about that because you still won, even though that was not your best physically, but you still win. Yeah. When you can overcome these things, I think, there's a lot of examples from the military that I can think of, but I just would love for you to keep working on reframing that, because the other part is that in bodybuilding, right, your best is always a relative term.
Moving target, yes.
Yeah, because your best it's never going to be your very best ever. It just is going to be your best to date, because you always have the opportunity to improve on that.
Yeah. That's what makes this sport so rewarding, but also so challenging.
You're right.
It's you're always, even if you know that's your best, you always want to get better.
Right. There's no end game really. I know somebody said to me a couple of days ago, I don't want to start prepping unless I know I'm bringing my best. And I'm like, but your best is the moving target. So like which best, you know? So at some point you got to jump in and I love that you did that, you know, and you kept coming back and then going and working on building some more. And like you said, because you have you're a taller person, you have more frame to fill out. Like that meant having to go back to the drawing board and keep working on building. And I remember when you won the overall at at the muscle contest show, and like what a huge deal that was, because you know being on the tall in the H class, like sometimes that can be a more challenging. So I know that moment was really huge for you too, you know. So and the cortisol levels in bodybuilding, it's like when Greg talks about playing injured, what's going through my mind is when you're dealing with loss, when you're dealing with that kind of stress, like the cortisol is a lot of what you were dealing with. Of course, that effect on the gut. And I know we're going to get into more of that, you know, as we continue to talk. But I just want to say how inspired I have been watching your journey. And I love that we're getting a chance to share some of that now and all the pieces that you've shared so far, everything from recovering from an eating disorder, which we know is huge and hard. And a lot of people don't recover. And I love that you were able to use your journey in bodybuilding to inspire you to want something more than being skinny.
Yeah. And that's so big, because I think a lot of people are afraid, like they have this negative connotation around bodybuilding that it can make an eating disorder worse, which it can if you're not careful. Like if you come into this and you're like, I just want to stay stage lean year round, you know, for that reason, yes, it can be very negative. But if you're focused on the whole process and not just the stage lean part of it, like it really can change your life. I mean, going from macros and having the flexibility to eat what you want, eat a lot of food. And, you know, it completely changed my view of food in general. And like you said, like it just, you know, I think back to like where I was in the eating disorder days, and it's like going so long without eating. And now I'm like, I can't even imagine that. Like, like
We've been around
before
here,
that
we
was
know.
the goal. Now it's like,
I'm like, if I don't eat for 4 hours, like you don't want to be near me. But like, you know, it's totally transformed. Like, you know, I see the way that it impacts my body. So it's just been, if nothing else, like competing, like I always say, competing changed my life, but it also saved my life, because without it, I don't know that I would ever be in recovery. You know, it's just been, it's been a really like gratifying process. Not easy, but
we will, and so everybody knows, in this episode, we may talk a little bit about gut stuff, but we're going to talk more in depth on gut with Erin, who her experiences in that area are tremendous and are very informative. So if you like this episode, make sure you turn in for part 2 of this, where we're going to talk about gut. I do want to point out something that you just said, which I really love and am proud of, that you said in recovery for the eating disorder. And I wanted to go back to, I think it was 2017 when you moved to Florida, and you said that you started feeling some of the eating disorder things come back in. How the beautiful part is that you were able to recognize that and shift it, pivot from it. How'd you do that?
It really was a matter of eating enough for me. But it was also a matter of recognizing I wasn't happy where I was at in my life. That's a big part. So full disclosure, the reason I moved from North Carolina to Florida, yes, it was to be closer to my parents, but because of the eating disorder, I was spending so much money on laxatives and food that I was binging and purging, and I was, for the first time in my life, in debt. So I knew, I was like, something has to change. So for me, it was like, I wanted to be closer to my family to have that support system, but I also knew like financially I needed to make a change. So I was able to sell my townhome in North Carolina, get myself out of debt. And then once I moved to Florida is when I really needed to start kind of like picking up the pieces. That's not to say it did not happen overnight by any means. I mean, even when I was traveling for corporate, I remember like I would get to like the places I was traveling, I would immediately go to the grocery store to get like my meal prep, everything like that. We didn't have Instacart back in the day.
Back in my day.
We would actually have to go to a grocery store. And I remember I would go to like, stock up on like cakes and cookies and ice cream and just binge and purge because I was in this loop of I was so miserable doing what I was doing and I was just self-medicating. So it wasn't like I was still in that loop. I was just, I was working really hard to pull myself out of it. I didn't realize it was because I was just so unfulfilled in what I was doing. And I was also, again, underfilling my body. So it was a combination of all of these things happening. And I finally needed to like start reversing, getting my food high enough and like addressing like, why am I having these issues still? Like, and I think that's kind of where like doing a little bit of coaching on my own, I started to see, okay, this is more what my passion is. So it was learning like what was triggering these behaviors and working to kind of address them through that.
Does this still come up? Does the eating disorder piece still come up for you?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you recognize it and then deal with it?
So I'm very aware of what the triggers are. And I will say, and I know we're going to talk more about the gut stuff too, like the whole gut journey was a huge trigger for me, and we'll kind of get into that too. But I also notice like when I'm put in situations that bring up certain emotions or certain feelings for me, that's when I can, when a binge urge comes on, or, when I kind of can notice myself like, food's like kind of like I'm just not, and it's not like I'm not hungry. It's like a food's bad kind of thing. It's a very different distinction.
It's a relationship with food piece?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a very different distinction. So it's, I know that if I'm super stressed or if, again, there are certain events going on in my life, I have to be aware of, okay, like these things might come up for me.
Do you have clients right now that are dealing with those issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say less so in terms of like deep in the throes of an eating disorder. I would say dealing with like issues with their relationship with food or, fear of gaining weight or fear of food or binging, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's definitely something like I work with clients on, but it's mostly identifying the root cause of it because it's not about the food. 99% of the time, it's not about the food. It's about something else going on.
Right. It's either a sense of control or it's a comfort or
it's a coping mechanism.
Coping mechanism, yes.
For me, it was a way of numbing myself. If you're, especially as things evolved between like the binging or the purging, when you're in that moment, or even like laxative abuse, when you're dealing with like the effects of laxatives or you're binging or purging, you're not thinking about everything else going on. All you're thinking about is like what you are doing in that moment. So it was very much a coping mechanism because I didn't have to deal with everything else going on in my life, or it was the kind of like the escape that I got from it. So it's finding ways of dealing with what you're going through, healthier coping mechanisms that help you, but you have to be aware of the root cause of it first.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you, so you said something that I found really interesting was that bodybuilding can amplify or exacerbate these issues, these eating disorder issues. And I thought your response about that was really thoughtful and saying that it can, but it can also help you work through them, which it sounds like it's well, it doesn't sound like that is definitely your course, is that it's helped you work through these things. And it got me to really thinking about these issues are going to manifest. It's not like bodybuilding is going to make these issues like worse or better. I mean, it's like bodybuilding is a vehicle, a tool, if you will, that allows you to then work through these things. Because ultimately, if you don't work through these things, they're going to accumulate. You're going to deal with them at some point somehow.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And two, it's not even just going into the gym and training. Like that in itself is a good stress reliever. That's an escape. So it's that lifting weights in itself, regardless of if you want to compete or not, that can be a really good escape. But it is learning, like bodybuilding is learning about, like you cannot spend your entire life in a deficit if you want to put on muscle, if you want to see changes in your physique. So it's learning, like you have to embrace the parts of the process of bodybuilding that are uncomfortable to really to see those impacts too.
And we have seen that. You just brought back a memory that there was we used to work out at this gym in Sacramento, and there was a person that came in and was on the treadmill or on the Stairmaster for literally, if we were in their gym for an hour and a half, 2 hours, she was on there when we got there. She was on there when we were there, and she was still on there when we got out every single day. And it was just, and there was never any resistance training, no weight training, no nothing. And I mean, I can't obviously make a diagnosis, but I would say that she had some eating issues just based on her frame and how she looked.
Some body dysmorphia.
Yeah, or body dysmorphia or something. It was, and it just is, it's hard if you're not going to actively, if you look at these things as single dimension and, well, if I just go do cardio or I just go to the gym, but it's like a lot of things. And I think you've detailed a lot of those things. It's not just going to the gym. It's not just the resistance training. It's the stuff that you're working on emotionally and mentally, physically, nutritionally. I mean, sleep, all of that stuff.
It all matters.
Yeah.
And the thing too is like, I was one of those people when I first started, I was only doing cardio. And like, we had to like really work on my mindset when I started with the trainers pulling my cardio down. But I think a lot of it too is like, and I only can speak from a female perspective, but as women, we're told like the scale going down, eat less, do more. That's what you need to do. Like that's what we're taught in this society. I think it is shifting a bit, or at least it has over the last couple of years. But I know when clients come to me and they're eating like sub 1,000 calories, doing 2 hours of cardio a day, and I have to be like, hey, we need to go into a reverse diet. It's terrifying because they're like, well, I want to lose weight. And I'm like, okay, you got to eat more and do less. And that's just this concept that like it's terrifying as women, but it is necessary, and I'm happy that the narrative is changing because like that's not sustainable long term. And also too, it's like it's hard because especially as competitors, we love seeing ourselves stage lean. Like it's really cool, like to see the muscles, the veins, everything like that. But like, and you tell me this all the time, like winning physiques are made in the improvement season. You've got to put on body fat if you want to build. And I remind clients, like I've spent more time away from the stage than I have in a prep through this entire process. Usually I'm taking 2+ years off between shows. And it's like, I think that we are.
And to clarify, it's not off. It's off of dieting and
It's
competing.
out of prep. It's other
out
than
of prep. Yeah.
And I say that, and of course, I know you totally agree. Coming from a coaching standpoint, that some people think off means you turn it off. But what does off mean to you?
I mean, this is when you train hard. This is when you eat, you put the food to good use in the gym. You're training hard. You're focused on recovery. You're getting your food up. You're putting body fat on. I mean, it's this, you don't overdo it, you know what I mean? But you have to get to a healthy body fat where your hormones are balanced. It does make a difference. And, everyone's like, well, how much weight should I gain during an improvement season? And I hate answering that question because it really depends for everybody. Like I know there have been improvement seasons I put on 20 and 30 pounds because I had to put on a good amount of muscle. Now, again, I'm 5'10", so like on my frame, that's that's not
it's very different, right? Somebody who's 5 foot tall versus somebody who's 5'10", like that number should be different.
Right. Yes. And we've done it in a very like slow, controlled way. It's not like I'm putting that on in like a month's time. But when you're taking 2 years off, like, yeah, you're going to be putting on some body fat. And I think people are so, competitors are so afraid to take that time away from the stage, but that's the only way you're going to really come back better. And, especially when you get to the pro level, it's a whole different ballgame. You have to have a lot of muscle density. So I think for me, taking those long improvement seasons have really like helped my mindset with food too, is because I know I need to take that time away. It's helped me like be okay with the discomfort of putting on the extra body fat, getting my food up. And I think that's what's really also helped me be in recovery, is because I know like it's a phase of life. You know what I mean? There's you go through deficits, you go through surpluses, but you have to go through those cycles to get the changes you want in your physique.
So there's like a purpose behind. And it's so funny because I feel like too, like when you have a purpose, it makes it so much easier to execute on whatever it is that you're doing. Even when, clients, I would tell people ask questions and understand why you're doing what you're doing. Because when you feel like, you have clarity. Okay, this makes sense. I'm in a surplus because my goal is to put this muscle on. I need to make sure that I'm showing up at the gym and giving my all. That's where, that evolution occurs. So it's been really cool to watch the evolution in you and then to see your athletes now thriving so much. And I do think having so much experience in these different areas has made you be able to be so much more empathetic and understand what they need in terms of that education so they know why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like I'm now, because of my background with the eating disorder and gut and everything like that, I've realized over the years how important balance is. Not obviously in prep, there's not a whole lot of balance you can have. You got to be like on it 100%. But when you are in improvement season, you have to have balance. You've got to be able to live your life outside of, prep and everything like that. You've got to be able
tracking every single morsel,
Can
every grain of salt.
Can I just tweak this a little bit in
Yes.
terms of balance? Because I think balance is the same. I look at balance the same way that we do bodybuilding versus body built. It's a process. It's an ongoing process. Balance is also an ongoing process. It's not an end state. I like to think of it as balancing, and the metaphor or the visual that always comes up in my head is a tightrope walker who has one of those poles and, hey, okay, I'm shifting a little bit to the left. I got to shift back to the right. Oh, I'm shifting too far to the right. I got to shift back to the left. That's the ongoing process that is this. And I do think there can be balancing in prep. It just is going to look different than balancing in the improvement season or the off season. Because you're right, it is. I mean, you're engaging in something a little bit extreme or a lot of bit extreme, depending or with everybody, to be able to put that best package on stage. But there does have to be some balancing to it. Because if there is not, then it's going to be a one and done. If you get so far out of balance in a prep that you either can't recover from it, can't reverse out of it, that you get so far and we've seen that. I mean, we've seen this. We've seen people that just have such a negative maybe experience, or maybe negative is not the right word, but just such a deep experience where they are so far out of balance in a prep that
The pendulum has to swing really far the other direction.
Yeah.
There's the burnout. I mean, you get done with the prep and you're very burned out.
Yeah.
And too, balance looks different for everybody.
It does.
I mean, there are some clients that I can do intuitive eating days. Some it's like you got to be really kind of like an untracked meal and you kind of have to specify what they eat going into it. Like balance looks different for everybody in different seasons.
It does.
My balance right now looks totally different than it did a year ago. So, it is always evolving, like you said.
And athletes also need something different. Sometimes athletes need something different within their coach. So they need you to be the drill sergeant one day. They need you to be the compassionate person the other day. And recognizing what to deliver to those athletes on that particular day. And I've seen you do that. So maybe you talk about that. How do you figure out what Erin to be on any given day with your athletes?
It does depend on the client, and you have to, this is where working with a coach and being open and honest with your coach is so important. I tell my clients from day one when I have the initial consult call, the more information you can provide to me, this is what really helps me get to know you, because I can generally tell in a check-in if something's off. Whether that be then I get on a phone call or even at a show, as we're leading into peak week, as you're checking athletes in each day, you can kind of tell if the tone shifts. So it's really learning the athlete and recognizing, being able to work with them for longer. It kind of helps you know what their balance looks like or what their needs are. Or you just have to kind of tell them you need to communicate to me what you need, because there are some times where it's maybe something comes up that you don't know and you don't really know how to deal with it. But if you have that one-on-one conversation, that can help you learn what that athlete needs in that moment.
It's interesting. You just made me think of something. So one of the things that we struggle with as coaches is the body's desire for homeostasis, to get back to that baseline, whatever that is. And that's why low calories, high macro or high cardio it can be negative over time, because your body normalizes to that. But then if you keep going that way, it'll just shut down. It just basically won't burn any more calories. And I was thinking about that emotionally, is that I don't know that the emotional baseline is something that's always so difficult to find. And I don't know that your brain is always going back to that desire to seek homeostasis mentally or emotionally. I don't know if that's true, if that's accurate or not, but I was just thinking about that because you made me think about it. But I don't know what you think about that.
I mean, the brain is like when you're
So
in prep, there's a
complex.
whole lot going on when you're
Yeah.
in prep. Like,
Or there's not a whole lot going on.
I
We
mean,
call
the
that
emotions.
brain.
I was about to say, there's a whole lot of emotions. There's the brain fog. So I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs. And I mean, I feel like too, it's like that plays a big role because sometimes it could just be your athletes are totally burned out. And like if you're in peak week and that happens, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can
Power
do.
through
Like
it,
you
yeah.
just got to power through. But I mean, if you can tell a client is struggling and you're like 4 or 5 weeks out, that's when you can be like, okay, maybe we do a refeed, or maybe we have you take a full rest day, like no cardio, no steps, no nothing. Like it's learning kind of like and a lot of it I feel like is kind of gut instinct. Once you kind of know the client, you're like, okay, I feel like this is what they need. The brain is definitely a harder thing to navigate.
It is.
Well, and I think I love that you said that about the gut instinct, because I do think there's just a real art to what we do. Like, of course, there's a lot of science in what we do, and we're calculating, the macros, and we're figuring out the train. There's the scientific pieces of it, but then there's that piece. Anybody could download a diet.
Yeah.
Or download a workout off the internet, but it's that like getting connected and being able to kind of feel where that person's mindset is, and then be able to respond and react or ask additional questions. Like you said, like, I love that you said that, like, sometimes, you just need to get on a call. Maybe you can tell, you can read between the lines, like, I'm not getting the full picture here. So I'm going to just jump on and hear their voice and, make sure they're okay. And, but I do think that's the art part of what we do. Yeah.
I mean, because like you said, body is such a dynamic thing, and like even the mind is. So like we're always learning too, you know what I mean? And I think the more that we get experience and the more it's hard online because like you're obviously just using a screen. So it's sometimes too, like you said, just talking through it, it just helps the client feel heard too. Like even if it's just a rough day of prep, you're hungry, you're tired, and they just want to talk through it with someone. I mean, it does go a long way.
It does. It's so funny how sometimes just that little conversation can just allow the person to take the breath. And, because I know that especially with such an extreme sport, it's very easy to spin out sometimes and just feel overwhelmed or frustrated. And just like knowing that somebody's in your corner and believing in you, that sometimes can put that to rest.
Especially knowing too, like every prep is different. I mean, I've had some clients where there have been shows I've been able to, I had one client I'm thinking of, like I could reverse her the whole first prep because her food was so low. So I'm like, great, I'll prep you, but we got to reverse the whole time. So when we actually had to go into a real prep, it was a real struggle because she had never been through a real prep. So it's like kind of learning to navigate like those things too, because every prep is different. Even every peak week is different. It's just, you kind of have to pivot based on how the body is responding and support clients who aren't used to those changes too.
That's the thing that I always find interesting is every prep is different, and the data that we get helps us learn your body, and every prep is different. So yes, this is informative for how it happened the last time, and this time something's different. Hormonally you're different, or body composition you're different, whatever the difference is, but there's a difference. So the art of this is identifying, okay, how do I apply those lessons of knowing your body, but now with this new overlay of these are the different variables that we're dealing with in terms of how you are different.
Yeah. I mean, we dealt with this year with me with my gut, because coming off of my gut journey, how do we prep that versus, before I dealt with all of these issues too. So it's about learning your body through that phase too.
Whoa. That's it. But that's a great teaser into episode 2 for the gut. Describe yourself as a coach.
I'm very detail oriented. I want my clients to learn as well. So I do encourage them. I say, like, be as detailed as possible. Ask questions. Like, I want them to learn too. I would say I'm very compassionate and empathetic, but I will be very firm if I need to be. Like if if we need to grind, I'm going to tell you we need to grind. If you need to get it together, I'm going to tell you need to get it together. So I think, for me, I've found such a good balance in being able to be like kind of a firm coach, but with the empathy, especially through everything that I've gone through. But the biggest thing is like, I want clients to learn. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to be able to advocate for themselves from a health perspective, for their fitness goals, and really just see them thrive, not only with their physical goals, but mentally too.
I love that.
Do you coach how you would like to be coached, or do you coach based on how an athlete needs to be coached, or both?
I would say both.
Okay.
Because I would say both, because I want my client to feel supported like I feel supported, but I also I feel like I coach the way that athlete also needs to be coached. So I think it's a combination of both.
And we didn't cover this, but I'm in the rewind process. I don't think anybody looking at your shoulders may know this, but you were a competitive swimmer all the way through high school, correct? Okay, and went to North Carolina State.
Yes, go Pack.
Go Pack, okay. which we talk about. Plus, you're a Green Bay Packers fan, so
yes.
Was that because it's the Pack and the Packers?
Actually, no, but
okay, all right,
it worked out.
You lived in Wisconsin for a while.
It makes
I know
it
that.
really easy. No, I didn't.
I thought you lived in Wisconsin. Oh, Ohio. What am I saying?
Yeah, Ohio.
Cincinnati. Yeah. I know, sorry.
He's all same thing.
Yeah. Cincinnati, Wisconsin.
It's all cold.
It's all cold back there. Yeah. Erin, talk to us about. There's a couple other things I just want to hit on before we close this out. You are a lighter skin, so you're a taller athlete.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the giraffe class, in the G class.
H, but that's okay.
H. Sorry. I'll always G, but there's.
I mean, it's good. They say H is 5'7" and everybody else, so which is.
So you're in the
All
tallest
of the
class,
above. Yeah.
and you are lighter skinned, and those have created additional challenges for you in terms of competing. So maybe talk about. I love you. You are my tanning expert. So when we're at a show, I always really rely on you and your tanning experience. Tell people what you have learned in terms of being a lighter skinned athlete and getting that show tan. And I know we're still
And the hair too.
And the hair,
Yeah.
yes.
So I have to start my skin prep like 10 to 14 days in advance. So this is like the more exfoliating, moisturizing, like 10 to 14 days. I also do dry brushing just to like really help kind of like get an even tan. And then if say the show is on a Friday, I have to start my base coat on Wednesday. Otherwise I will not be dark enough. I mean, and we tried everything in 2020.
Yes,
like,
we did.
I mean, I was green. It was bad. So now what I do is I start the Wednesday before. I do a coat of overnight, wake up, rinse Thursday morning, go about my day. Thursday night, I do another coat of overnight, wake up, rinse, get up the next morning, go about my day, do my pump up, and then I do straight super dark. This year was easier. We only needed to do like 1 or 2 coats of super dark. And then I
think that a lot of that's because of all the skin prep that you were doing. So.
Yeah. And I know keep going back to this, but I think a lot of that too was gut related, that I was having issues with the tan and like the pH of my skin. And then, so I do 2 coats of super dark on Friday, and then I do top coat on show day. I know in 2020 and 2022, we were doing coats after coats after coats. I mean, I remember I was checking in with Alyssa from Potan more than I was with you for peak week, like just to get the tan right. But it does take a lot for me to like get dark enough.
And something you shared with me this year that I just think and it came into play this weekend, in fact, because there was an athlete that I could tell they were wearing their waist trainer, and I could tell their stomach was lighter. And so go ahead and give people that. Maybe we should save this for a fusion. You know what? Let's save that for a fusion hack. Okay. We'll save that for a fusion hack. That's a little teaser into that. Yeah, no?
I like it.
Okay,
I like it.
all right.
I'm on board.
What else you want to talk about with Erin in this one? We've teased the gut episode, which I think is
a lot.
We've teased that a lot, which I like.
We have a lot to talk about in that area. But I think I love this, introduction into you as an athlete, you as a coach, your background, talking about, how bodybuilding has helped, with your, we didn't talk about like the body dysmorphia piece of it too, but like embracing this different body type. I mean, I guess it kind of leads into it when you talked about like the pressure on women a lot of times. Because in my generation, because I'm a little older, it was literally like the skinnier the better. And it really does. It really messes with people's minds, and then they kind of lose sight, so like this evolution into like, I want to have muscle and, feel strong. And like, I think that's just amazing. And then your ability to now take all that you've learned to help other people. And I'm excited to jump into this other episode because you've become such an expert on the gut, not just because, your inspiration was your own journey, but then also like you're wanting to help other people because everybody's gut journey is a little different. So I know we're going to go really in depth with that. So if people enjoyed this episode, they need to make sure to watch the next one.
What's your checkout word?
Oh,
We started with gratitude. Where do you want to go now?
Fulfilled.
Okay. Oh, I like that. I like that. All right. So, Erin, before we end this episode, tell people how they get in touch with you.
You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Erin Kamm _ IFBB Pro. Or just reach out on our FitBody Fusion website.
And it's ErinKamm.
Yes, it is.
We have a lot of different Erin spellings, so just to clarify.
Yes.
And let's see. Is that it?
That's it. You're
That's
going
it
to
for
do the
this
sign
episode.
off?
Yeah, sorry. I was writing a note to myself. All right. So everybody remember to like, comment, subscribe, leave your reviews, and we do look at those. You can get in touch with Erin in the way that she said. And if it's not already apparent, we love you. We love you dearly. We call Erin our RHSC, redheaded stepchild, but she's really our child. She's just our child. So you're adopted officially, and we've talked to your parents about that. They're okay. They're willing to share.
Perfect.
They're willing to share. So like, comment, subscribe, leave your reviews. Remember the 3 B's, which is be good to yourself,
Be good to each other.
and be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBody Fusion.